meeting 31, and we officially are calling this meeting to order. As usual, we will start with our chaplain prayer and pledges. So if Gary Marcella Jenkins would come forward, we'll start.
Good morning, everyone, and God bless. You bow your heads as we pray. Dear God, we ask your blessings on the people who have been called to lead the community in which we live and work and play, our mayor, the council, and everyone that's here. Help us as leaders to do not ask first, how do we fix this, but what do we need to learn? How might we need to change? And to whom do we need to listen? Remind us as a community, because we all forget from time to time, especially in this noisiness of the season, that they are not only leaders, but also servants, and that it is their responsibility and ours to serve the common good for all. Grant them and us the wisdom and courage to know and do what is right and good and true. May we speak out when it's time to speak out and listen patiently and receptively when it's time to listen. May we always be guided by the spirit of love. Our hearts go out to the families of Laura Lewis, Raymond Mesa, who truly was a blessing to this community. We pray that God gives them peace that surpasses all understanding to the families and friends that love them dearly. This we pray in the name of Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.
Repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and we will start. There are no proclamations this morning, or recognitions, so we will immediately go into our public comment section of the agenda. Public comments, state your name and address or SMD area. Each citizen can speak just once per item unless asked to comment by council. The public comment may last for 3 minutes unless extended by council or translation services. The proponent or opponent, 5 minutes unless extended by council or translation services. Council has no obligation to respond to comments or questions from the public. Any response from a member of the City Council to non-agenda comments is limited to a statement of specific factual information, recitation of existing policy, and directing staff to place the subject on a future agenda. I'm going to start this morning by offering a public comment, and I want to say, well, first of all, good morning to everyone and Merry Christmas. It's that time of the year. We've got Thanksgiving behind us, so I think we can officially say Merry Christmas. I'd like to offer some words this morning to the public as we enter the Christmas season. San Angelo is such a special place during this time of the year, from the fort, downtown, and the light tour to the spirit inside each and every one of our citizens. We know that Christmas time is not magical for every person, and it can be a hard time for many families. So I want to encourage anyone struggling to please reach out to one of the many nonprofit organizations we have in our community for help. If you're not sure where to start, our Neighborhood and Family Services Department can assist. You can reach them at 325-655-0824 or email Director Bob Salas at robert.salas, that's S-A-L-A-S, at cosatx.us. We wouldn't be the community we are without the support of our nonprofits and what they provide to our citizens in need. We are blessed with many nonprofits and churches who work hard every year to help those in need. The holidays can be a magical time for many people and families, but it is not magical to everyone. The holidays can bring additional stress and loneliness, so please, if you need help and support, reach out to those in this community that can help. We know there are always things to be improved here in San Angelo, and I want to emphasize that your city government and council are working to improve quality of life for every citizen. Your quality of life here is one of our top priorities. If there are things inhibiting that quality, then I invite you to please reach out to your council member or to me, or come to council meetings with suggestions or ideas on how we can improve. I love this city. I love this community. The San Angelo community has and always will work hard to help support those in need, and that is why we serve you, and that is why we choose to call San Angelo home. There's truly no place like San Angelo, especially during Christmas. I wish you all a wonderful holiday filled with faith, family, and friends. Further public comment today?
I'd like to introduce to you our new recreation manager for the city of San Angelo, Mr. Aaron Kentner.
Welcome.
Good morning. I just want to tell everybody I'm happy to be here and I'm excited for the opportunity. I look forward to working for the city. So,
Thank you. Further public comment? Seeing none, we will move on into our consent agenda. We will start by asking each council member if there is an item that they would like to see pulled for further discussion. I'll start with Larry. Karen?
C and D, please.
Lucy?
G.
Harry?
No, ma'am.
Tom?
Lucy Bullard.
Okay, Tommy? Okay, we got that done. Go Lucy. All right, so with that, may I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda with the exception of items C, D, and G?
So moved.
So moved by Tommy, second by Tom. Any public comment concerning the items with the exception of C, D, and G? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the consent agenda without C, D, and G, please say aye. Aye. Consent agenda approved with exception of C, D, and G. All right, we'll start with item C. Consider awarding the sole source purchase of wastewater treatment filter screens to Safeco in the amount of $633,450 and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Shane, you're on.
Yes, ma'am. Questions?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Council members are often asked by the public for an explanation on items that appear to be big-ticket items that fall outside of the budgeting process. They often further ask whether or not there was a bid process. They, I think, would like an explanation of how we arrived at this moment in time in December, not October, and why there's no sense of multiple bids. If you could just explain for those attending and watching, I would be grateful.
Okay.
Thank you.
For this particular item right here, it's one that we did have in the process through the budget process. We had budgeted for it in the process, and so it's just how the timing came across to get it on council and get it on the agenda. This one is a sole source because it is a patented, a portion of their process is patented. They hold the sole patent on it, so that's why this process didn't go out for bid on this one particular item for this fine screen that goes at the head of the treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant.
That's perfect, thank you. And then item D, same question with special attention paid to the word,
We
the
need
words.
to do one item at a time.
Oh,
So
sorry.
C
Of course,
first.
Okay.
sorry, I beg your pardon.
That's okay. All right. Any further questions from any council member for Shane on item C?
No.
All right. May I have a motion to approve item C?
So moved.
So moved by Karen, seconded by Lucy. Public comment concerning this item? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving item C, say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved, 7-0. We will now move on to item D, consider awarding a professional service indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity IDIQ multiple award task order master contract for professional services related to public works projects to Improtech Hibbs and Todd Incorporated, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents.
Pardon me for that misstep there. So similar question, for the sake of the public, paying special attention to the use of the word indefinite. Can you help the public understand what that means, and that we'll be reviewing items individually going forward?
Yes, that's exactly correct. We actually have several of these that we have out there with different engineering firms out there where we have indefinite quantities and
Indefinitely.
indefinite, yes, IDIQs, and so we have several of these out there. But what that means is that we can bring multiple task orders to the city council, and so this contract is just an overreaching contract. It's just the basic contract. In each individual project that we come up with, whether it's wastewater treatment or it's something with the water plant or, water expansion, anything like that we have, especially in the water side of things, that we can bring back multiple task orders. And so that we just have to go through the RFQ process one time instead of having to go through that entire process every time we want to engage a firm for a project.
So is it correct that this firm is an entity populated by specialists, that their specialties fall outside of the expertise of our staff?
Correct.
Locally?
Correct. And, especially when we start, with a lot of these larger projects, our staff is very limited, currently. And right now we're doing is we're actually probably overworking our existing staff on our existing projects that we currently have right now, just managing those projects, much less developing new projects, and from start to scratch, from all the way from initial concept through design, all the way through construction. So.
And they really are specialists at many of these
And they are.
issues.
That's,
And-
yes, they are.
Yeah. Further questions from council for Shane on this item? All right. Oh,
I have a question, please. So each.
if you'll come forward to the microphone, please.
So how long is the
Could you
contract?
state your name and your
Oh, I'm
SMD
sorry.
area, please?
I'm Jackie Chestnut Robinson, and I am an engineer, a local engineer. And my question to y'all is then, does each project continue on with them, or do you get bids from different engineering firms for each project? Or is this indefinitely, now the city is permanently tied to them and nobody else gets to bid on projects that come in? I mean, y'all aren't going to go out to any other engineering source
I can
once you've hired
answer
them?
that question.
Okay.
Because it's an engineering firm, we don't bid those. We do requests for qualifications, and we have 7 or 8 engineering firms that are already under contract. The process is that we send out this proposal saying we are looking for engineers to qualify to perform services for the city. They provide us a list of the kinds of services they provide, and then whenever we have a water project or a street project or whatever kind of project comes up, we go and look at that list and see who is qualified to do that, and then start negotiating with them individually. So we can use anybody off of that list.
Okay, and how do you
for-
get on that list?
There was a process that happened like in August, maybe,
Okay.
initially, and then this particular firm was left off that list, and so they qualified independently from
Okay.
that.
And do you look at hub firms?
Can you look at what?
Hub firms?
Absolutely, we do.
Okay, because I'm a hub firm, so anyway. And then, so how long is that process with this group? And then when will it be available again for going out for stuff? Because I'm trying to see what the indefinite period is, please.
Okay.
So Shane just said the contract period is 3 years. So
Three-
we'll come
so-
back in 3 years and
For 3
requalify
years.
all of the engineering firms that want to work with the
Okay,
city.
and so there are 7 or 8 now that are currently listed in your qualifications.
Yes.
Yes,
And if
ma'am.
a specialty comes up that none of them are qualified for, then we might qualify somebody else mid-year or
Okay,
after
for,
2 years.
so you've locked down with them for 3 years. Very good, thank you.
Any further questions for Shane on this item? All right, may I have a motion for approval of item D? So moved by Karen, seconded by Larry. Public comment on this item, further public comment, if any? All right, seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of item D, please say aye. Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Our last item is item G. Consider approving Tiers Board recommendation of an additional incentive funding for 2 previously approved projects in the South Tier Zone. 1 is 213 North Chaburn, and 2 is 1 West Concho. Aaron, you're on, and Lucy, if you'll ask your questions.
Erin.
Or make your comments.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I just wanted to know, how did y'all come about picking these 2 projects and giving them the complete amount when there were other projects also?
Great question. Aaron Vanoy, Assistant Director of Planning Development Services. So as I look back at the video from the Tiers Board as well as the City Council meetings that dealt with Tiers items this last year, it appears that through the FY23 Tiers cycle, there were 2 South Tiers cycles that funding was granted. In those 2 cycles, there were only 2 projects that did not get the full request. Those being 1 West Concho and the 213 North Chadburn. They received $68,000 roughly. There was an item in August that came before City Council that was trying to designate some future interest to get them closer to that 75,000 cap for the South. It did not pass at that time. In October, when the new budget year started, that those interest dollars were put into the Tiers account. At the October meeting, it was presented to the Tiers Board for those 2 projects because they had not hit the 75,000 maximum, that there was this additional funding, which ended up being, I think,
Fantastic.
4,572, and that would put those 2 projects at 72,983 for an award. We will have to amend their contracts if they want to accept that. This item is to see if the council is able to go with the Tiers recommendation of supporting that additional funding.
And just to add to that, at that council meeting, I think that was a topic that came up. Council said, those funds are not currently budgeted, which we agreed, and they said, if you want to look at bringing that back once they're officially in there, then fine. But so this is sort of a follow-up to that, based on the.
So are these the only 2 projects that weren't fully funded?
In the last fiscal year for the South, that is correct. There was one other in the first cycle that only got $49,000, but looking at the case, they were only eligible for the $49,000. Their costs generated from the project only added up to the $49,000, so they weren't eligible for the $75,000. Now, years prior, there were other projects years prior that did not get the full allocation. There were multiple projects that may have gotten a much lower amount because there weren't enough funds.
Okay, and so these funds are going to be more or less divided between the amount, the interest amount is going to be divided by these 2 projects?
Yes, ma'am.
So Aaron, are you saying that all the other projects approved in 2023 for Tiers, that I think the assumption was that because there was only X amount of money available in the Tiers fund at that specific funding cycle, that there was a determination to only give a certain percentage to all of those requests, even if they were not fully funded for that requested dollar amount?
That has certainly been the case in years past. In '23, there were 2 funding cycles. The first funding cycle, there were 3 projects that received funding. two of them at their maximum at the 75,000, and then the one project at the 49,000 for what was actually applicable cost recovery. And then in the second cycle, that's the cycle where there were three projects. The Tiers Board chose not to fund one project because it was what they termed a green space project, a vacant piece of land. And then they funded the other two projects. They basically split those two in half. Instead of the 75,000, they split what they had remaining in the South Tiers Fund and gave them both 68,000 roughly.
Which are these two?
Which are
that they're
these two
reviewing
projects.
today?
Yes, ma'am.
Further questions?
Christmas light to show up. So, Aaron, so let me ask you this. So are we fair and consistent with how we're treating everybody? That's my number one concern on the tiers in the South Zone is it fair and consistent, how we're going across? Nobody's left out. Lucy did an excellent job of covering exactly what I was going to cover. And what's the total dollar amount?
I'll come back to the total dollar amount. As far as how we're treating them, we believe we are. I mean, they all have the same criteria to be judged on. That goes to the Tiers Board. They get to make their decision. Then we bring that decision here to the City Council. In this case, the Tiers Board did recommend back in the summertime, let's use that additional funding. That was the interest funding. It was decided not to do that until it became a real fund in October.
And, and I think I remember discussing, we're not letting them have the interest up front.
Correct. Correct.
We had that, and that's good. And you know what? I didn't want to know the full amount. I want to know the amount of this request.
The amount of this request, it was split between them at $4,572 per project.
Right. It's $9,000. Okay. All right, that's the end of my questions.
Do you have a question, Karen? Any other questions? All right. Then may there be a motion for approval?
I move to approve as presented.
A second by Larry. Any public comment? Seeing none, we will take a vote. All those in favor of approving item G, please say aye.
Aye.
Hearing only yays, we will now consider item G approved, 7-0. That means we'll now move into our regular agenda. Comments regarding items on the, you need some water. We will now move into our regular agenda. Comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are exempt from the time limit above and instead must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. We will start with item A. Consider approving an agreement with Duncan Group Southland LLC for the development of a stormwater detention area on city property generally located northeast of the intersection of Valley View Boulevard and College Hills Boulevard, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. You're on, Carl.
Yes, let me give some background information for this item. But first, I want to point out two other folks who can speak to this item. First of all, the developer, Mr. James Duncan, and also, of course, Shane Kelton, who can answer any questions. The location of this property is off Knickerbocker. You can see the neighborhood Walmart there. This is Knickerbocker. This is Valley View. This is College Hills Boulevard. It's in the large residential Southland area. The property in question is about a little less than 26 acres. The developer owns property adjacent to the property in question. A little bit closer in, you can see the property lines. Some background as to this property. The school district once owned this property, and their original intention was to develop Lamar Elementary School. They realized they could not do that. They acquired other property and built Lamar at a different location. They approached the city sometime about 2007 about doing an exchange of this property for some other properties that we held, specifically the Reagan Elementary School playgrounds, San Jacinto School playgrounds, and Bradford Elementary, the park, so they could do their expansion of that school. And so that took effect in 2009, and the city acquired this property. Because we exchanged parklands for it, it's assumed that it is parkland and for future parkland use. Sometime a little over a year ago, Mr. Duncan approached the city, I assume Shane, about the possibility of developing a stormwater detention area on this property so he could maximize the development of his property for residentials, for houses. Another quick image, this arrow shows, the next picture will show from the northeast looking southwest across the property. It has an initial slope, but then it's relatively flat. There's 2 draws that cut through the area, and it's mostly has mesquite and shrub brush. So when, I'm trying to back up. Brian, please.
Help.
Help. Go back to the property slide, please. Thank you. So Shane approached me a little over a year ago and said, we've got a developer who wants to look into the possibility of developing a stormwater detention area on this property. I said, that's fine, but I'd like to see how we could develop that property as a park if we incorporate this stormwater detention area into that property. And so we went through a process with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, subcommittees, several meetings, and worked out a plan for how that park could be developed, incorporated in this detention area. I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is this is a concept. We don't have any money for the development of this park, but we wanted to see how it could be developed. And this shows what we propose to be developed on this property, and it's based on the high priority items that were identified in the master plan of 2020. So it hits a lot of the tick marks of the things that folks need. Walking trails, of course, playgrounds, practice fields. It also has a splash pad, basketball courts, and pickleball courts. Pickleball is getting very popular these days. And it also has the stormwater detention area. That can be used for open space use. So you can go down there and have practices, fly a kite, whatever you want to do. This shows.
And isn't that something that many cities are doing these days, is taking advantage of the retention or detention ponds and turning them into park areas or enhancing a community by how they landscape it or utilize it? You see a lot of articles written about
Yes.
that these days.
That is true. This is a slide that shows the top rankings for the facility desires by the public. And, hey, okay. So this slide does show how that detention area could be incorporated into this property and used as open space. So we're asking if we could be allowed to proceed with working with the developer to use the space. The city would do some clearing of the site. The developer would develop the detention area. And I believe that's it, unless Mr. Duncan wants to speak to the item.
Does council have questions for Carl or Shane at this point? Harry said he thinks it's a great concept.
And I
Tom?
think that, so, did it take a year for us to get to this point? I mean, from the time we did, if we've got some commercial or some development that's going around it, I was just hoping, I'd love to see these things come faster. I'll put it this way. I could only imagine a year's worth of meetings to go, because there's some development here that's going to go adjacent to this. That would be key. It's all right.
I think
Well-
they sent this out, the plan was done by a consultant who worked on the plan, so there was a process that happened to that. And the main thing to concern was that the property was originally meant for parks purposes, so how could we still retain that, make it happen, yet have enough space left over? Because while that retention pond area looks great there, it's not always going to be usable. So if it's had water come in and it's got debris on it and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to use it. So people may say, well, when is the city going to clean that up so we can get out there and have more practice fields? So that's what they were trying to do, is make sure they could maximize and still get the property for what it was originally intended for and let this happen.
Well, and just, you're talking about timeline, Tom. The reality is, again, it's concept. There's no money to develop it. So that's the catch-22. It looks great.
And Mayor,
It
I'm glad
makes
you
sense.
said that, because I don't want the public misconstruing
point.
that this plan, while the retention pond can get built, there is no money to do any of the other stuff. So, good point.
And just for information, we estimated to develop it like it is shown on the slide, it'd be about $3.5 million. Anticipate that we could get about $1 million, maybe a little more in grant funding, but the remainder, we currently don't have the remainder to start this project.
But let me ask another question. So in totality, it would be a $3.5 million project. Knowing that there are some pieces of it that might be able to get done sooner because funding might be available, do you have to do the complete thing at the $3.5 million, or can you prioritize projects and start development of a piece of it if funding's available? Or do you have to wait for the entire thing to be funded?
I mean, there's certain things you have to do first, like the site preparation, but of course, the parking lot could go in first. You could also develop the practice fields. You could put the trails in. You could do those separate from the full development.
Some of those grants, though, are typically, one way they grade you is how many of the top priorities are you hitting? So if I just said, I'm going to just put in, whatever, trails, while that gets me points, it doesn't give me the points if I said I'm hitting 5 of those top priorities. So yes, possibly, but we would not score as high if we weren't doing all the top priorities at once. If that makes any sense.
Other questions for Carl? Tommy?
Mayor, at some point, I want to let everybody have an opportunity. I had the opportunity to be involved in this, really more on the periphery than in the middle of it. But I've had multiple conversations with Mr. Duncan. I was invited to a couple of meetings with Carl and Shane. So at some point, I'll make maybe some wrap-up comments, but I'll save those till everybody else has an opportunity to speak.
Anybody else want to speak? We're good. All right, so no more questions, no more comments, then a motion, please. Oh, yes, please.
So he makes the motion and then I make a comment?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And then we'll get the microphone to you, right? We can get the microphone to you so you don't have to come up, I think. But with that, may I have a motion for approval?
Well, I'll go ahead and make my comments then, Mayor,
Okay.
if we're to that point. This is going to be beneficial for the city in the long term because of what this is going to help us with our stormwater. Yes, it's going to help with an amenity at some point in the future, hopefully, a park there. But stormwater is a problem on College Hills Boulevard. And by Mr. Duncan making the offer, and he is donating money to help this happen, this is going to help as much as anything the city with its stormwater problem in that area. And in my opinion, that because of the obviously the stormwater and drainage issues we have all over town, we need to take advantage of the opportunity that's presented to us right now with this project. So, Mayor, with that said, I would make a motion that this be approved as presented.
Is there a second? And seconded by Larry. All right, public comments, so please. Did we get a microphone to you?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
good.
Again, this is Jackie Chestnut, and I'm a local engineer. A couple of questions. I understand the stormwater issues. I've lived here for 35 years, and we do stormwater and all that kind of stuff, and we have big problems with that in our town and all around here that need to be addressed, and I agree with that. I am concerned with this issue of building parks in there. Again, as a person who has been involved in construction and engineering and consolidated contractors, we have built in this town with city funds, Texas State Ballpark fields, North Park. We've got parks all over this town that we have built, skate parks, everything else for this city. to be used that are not utilized at all hardly. And I know that because I go by and observe this because we built them. My question is that a good source, a good use of our funds at this point to direct them and have them looking at resources for parks when there are other things that are much more need to be addressed? Stormwater, absolutely, big problem, got to address that. But these other things and doing things like splash pads in the desert and things like this, we've got skate parks unused and all these other things, and that is a waste of our tax dollars and our resources, and there are other places we need to focus, like ADA and other things in this town that are much more important. So that's my question, is about improving all of it and saying that we won't even want to look at forwarding another park, especially in a place where we can't even utilize it most of the time. And I have a ranch where I have stormwater collection and everything else, and you can't use it, and it gets dirty, and you have to fix it, and we're the city then going to be tasked with having to do that. And then you got people complaining that I can't use my ballpark because the city didn't clean it up, and that's more money. So I think it needs to be looked at from that perspective, please, before you approve spending $3.5 million on the whole thing.
Well, and just to repeat, this is a conceptual. There's no $3.5 million available to do it right now. So what we're really trying to approve today is the dedication of that land, that space, to do the detention pond, and then, and working with the developer to make sure that the agreement works for him as well as for the city. The idea, conceptual idea, is so far away from reality, and in fact, with time, you never know what becomes a bigger priority. Is it the walking trails, which is a huge, big issue that is a primary issue in many cities today, versus a splash pad?
Or versus people being able to walk because we don't have ADA compliance in this town.
So,
Thank you.
that being said, this is conceptual. There's no sign-off on this plan, this design. There's no sign-off today on this plan. This is simply a presentation to agree to use this as a city for future planning, park opportunities.
And all I'm saying is perhaps that planning time and all the other expenses and hours of that should be spent toward things other than parks in this area.
Thank you. Further public comment?
I'd like to comment.
Yes, go
on
ahead,
that.
Larry.
Historically, the city did a very good job of having parks in the downtown area. But this area is, virtually has one park, and this is an extremely large area of residential homes. And there is no place for those kids to play except the one existing park over there. I think that's pretty doggone important for our kids.
You know, I think one of the issues that I've spoken to Daniel about is, on many occasions, is we constantly design parks for kids. We don't very often design parks for adults. And that area being an adult, also community, what are we doing in a more holistic approach to park development? And that's what I think we have to open our eyes and our minds to, is there are many adults who would like a place to walk and exercise, simply a place to walk. And those things can be developed without all of that other, the amenities there. But people do want a place to walk, and because we have passed a sidewalk ordinance that limits sidewalk development in many instances, we need a spot for people to be able to just simply walk. So, that being said, again, to keep in perspective, this is not a sign-off on this design. This is simply a sign-off on using this land for potential future park development.
I think the agenda item, excuse me, Mayor, I think the agenda item says consider approving an agreement with Duncan for the development of stormwater.
Yes, and
Okay.
that's really what we're talking about. That's a creative
that is
approach
what
to
we're
it,
talking
but
about,
that's what
yes.
we're signing off on today.
Yes.
Okay, further public comment? Okay, seeing none, then let's take a vote. All those in favor of approving item A, say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved 7-0. We'll move on to item B. Consider approving meet and confer agreement with the San Angelo Police Officers Coalition, SAPAC, establishing certain terms and conditions of employment for covered police officers to be effective January 1, 2024 through December 31, 2024, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. And today, we have a presentation by our Civil Service Director, Veronica Sanchez, and the SAPAC President, Noel Anderson. Come on up.
Good morning. Yes, thank you.
And others, too. Please introduce yourselves, all of you, so we understand who's standing up here. If you'll do that first.
Veronica Sanchez, Assistant Charge Director and Civil Service Director.
Noel Anderson, I am the president of SAPOC and a 20-plus year employee of the city of San Angelo.
I'm Blue Flores. I'm sorry, Veronica.
You're tall.
I'm the Vice President of Officers at SAPOC. I'm a 10-plus year employee at SAPD.
My name is John Bellini. I'm a sergeant with the police department and about 14 years with the city.
Thank you.
Just real quick, I'm going to give you a quick background history, and then they're going to go through their presentation. Back in 2017, the city had a meet and confer agreement that was not renewed, which had been in place since 2014. In April of this year, the association contacted the city and requested to resume negotiations, so we've done that. And before you today, we bring an agreement that we have come to. They're going to go through the entire agreement. I just wanted to hit a few items for you. The hiring process is established in this agreement to include lateral officers, which we currently don't have. This allows for commissioned officers to become officers for the city much faster. They don't have to go through the entire hiring process. It also
Meaning
allows
that people from an Abilene or a Midland
That's
could
correct.
laterally transfer, correct?
Yes. Assessment centers are also in this agreement, which provides for a more maybe a more experienced or qualified officer to promote. They don't just have to take a test. The assessment center provides a process by which they can do an in-basket process or things that would promote their skills more so than just taking a test. Additionally, the compensation piece, we do believe that that is the compensation or the pay plan is more competitive. The association will go through that presentation for you as well. This allows for part-time officers as well. Currently, those are not allowed, and so if there's ever a need between administration through this contract, we can allow for officers to come in on a part-time basis to assist if for some reason there's a need for that. And so the association will go through each one of those as well in their presentation and specifically compensation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, my name is Noel Anderson, and I am the president of SAPOC and currently assigned as a detective in the San Angelo Police Department. And real quick, before we get in here, let me just give you a brief history. We used to have two associations back when we had the other contract back in 2017, and we had two separate associations within the police department, and we found that that was not the best way to conduct business, and we have gone through a process of getting both associations merged into one. And so after that took about 4 years, and about 2 years ago, after we got the association completely merged, we're the first board, part of the first board that was elected. We started doing an assessment within our membership and within our department and with our chief to see what ways we could help and improve our police department with the community. And we started realizing that at some point we just became non-competitive, and it's really hard to put a finger on it as to what caused that, but we started really struggling with our retention and recruitment issues. So we made arrangements and we met with the city manager and we started expressing our concerns and trying to work for a solution to get this problem resolved. And one of the things that we have that's a benefit, I think, to the citizens of this community is we have the ability to do meet and confer contracts that can be specific for the city of San Angelo and specific for our agency. And so I got with a team of people. One of the good things about being the president of an association like this is I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. I just have to find the smart people and see if they'll work for me. And so that's what I've done here. We were able to, we believe, come up with a starting solution to get us back on the track we need to. We've located a performance-based plan, performance-based pay plan that we think will do well for us here. We're still behind the average, but we think this is a very solid foundation to start to fix our agency. So we're going to start going through the slide presentation.
That up. Like I said, my name is Blue Flores. I'm the Vice President of SAPOC for the regular officers. I'm also Chair of our Pay Committee. And I want to give special thanks to Michael Dane, Jenny Valenzuela, Teresa James, Kimberly Hawley, Tina Dierschke, and everybody that worked with us to put this together. It meant a lot for us moving forward. To start, I want to give a brief history about the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. Our regulatory body gives us the regulations and gives us the legislative rules on how to do law enforcement through training and other things built into the law with the occupations code. So various forms of peace officers, the Texas peace officers, sheriff's deputies, city marshals, constables, police officers, Texas Rangers, we're all one. We just have different jurisdictions and we all just have different job titles essentially. The Texas Commission on Law Enforcement is a function of the legislature, and their mission, as stated here, is a regulatory agency. So they set standards and, like I said, give us the regulations statewide to include jailers and telecommunication personnel, which is dispatchers. They started in 1969 from the 61st legislature, and that's what kind of created this body. So as I'm currently assigned to the training academy, while my badge says San Angelo Police Department, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement gives us the education standards, the curriculums, and everything we need to do our jobs. So it's not something that we do here locally. It's all from the state. What training looks like at our police academy, the basic peace officers course just was bumped up to 736 hours. There's 17 modules of training. We at the San Angelo Police Department give new recruits 1,144 hours of training. We also include intermediate credits that go into that training to get them a little more prepared than the state standard. Every 2 years, a peace officer has to have 40 hours of continuing education, which we just started a new training unit. The Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, every 4 years, institutes a training cycle. Built into that cycle are 2 training units, which corresponds with the biennial meeting of the legislature. So we have to get new training on new laws and things like that. To kind of give you an example, we are peace officers. We are giving a peace officer license. We are trained professionals that are subject to education, testing and licensure, and state testing and licensure. Built into that licensure are levels of advancement built into our career. So while I am a peace officer, I'm currently classified as a master peace officer based on my years' experience, education, and academic training that has been given to me. Each one of these levels corresponds with a certain number of years and certain number of training hours that goes into the advancement of that license. And I want to echo something Robert Kennedy said 60 years ago. He said, every community gets the criminal it deserves, but the public safety and law enforcement it insists on. And in today's time, we have this vision of law enforcement that goes to a better trained, better equipped, better well-rounded officer. We have today's time where we're taking steps to make that happen while battling the burdens of the past. So as we continue to move forward, education and the impact of education will mean more on public safety, and we can deliver better public safety service based on that. And that is a step we want to take with this contract. But again, the steps of education are basic, coming out of the academy, intermediate, advanced, and master. Are there any questions about those levels of licensure? Okay.
Larry?
I'm curious, are any of the hours that you provide in training, are they acceptable college credits? Can it go forward to a Bachelor of
So,
Arts
yes,
or-
sir, there are certain institutions across the state that do what's called a Bachelor of Applied Sciences degree, where they will take an officer's Texas Commission Law Enforcement Credit Public Service Personnel Service Record and apply it to programs within that will cut down the institution time for education. So only participating universities do that at this point. But yes, sir, they do.
Other questions or comments at this point? Okay.
So the pay scale that my committee and I had originally drafted was based off a pay scale in College Station. They were one of the first cities to get away from a tenured-based pay scale and put in a license-based pay scale. And this is the draft of the pay scale that we have come up with. As you can see, it's totally license-based. And one thing I just want to re-reflect on is the licensure mandates from the state have years of service and education levels built into it. So it's not something we created. We're just basing it off something that the state already mandates and regulates for us.
Are there opportunities over and above these base numbers for additional pay? Like I know we sometimes do for if you speak a second language, there's opportunity for additional pay for that or additional certifications or.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure there are many other things, but.
Yes, ma'am. Everything council's already put in ordinance that we're keeping the same. This is just reflective of base salary.
Okay.
Base salary and base salary only, because we needed that change, like Nola said. So when I say regular officer, I'm meaning non-supervisory. So there's only 5 places in this step for a regular officer. And again, if they move up in pay, this is going to be corresponding with the level of education and licensure that they get through time and through education. With supervisors, what the contract is written, we're going to put in licensure mandates for testing. So, for example, to be built into that, which Sergeant Molina will talk about in just a second, it's going to be corresponding with supervisory position, your license, and then pay, all the way from the academy cadet to lieutenant.
It's complicated, isn't it?
It will be. It's new
Yeah.
for everybody, but we can make it work. The city will make it work. So.
Sorry. Again, my name is John Bellini. I'm a sergeant with the police department. I'm the vice president of supervisors for SAPOC. So Veronica and Blue kind of talked on some of the points that are in the rest of this slideshow, so I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can for y'all. Our current staffing and recruiting, so we're authorized for 180 officers, but our current staffing is on paper at 162. 6 of those are in the academy, so they're not, yes, they're here, but they can't put on a uniform and come do the job if something were to happen. So our current workforce is 156 officers that are employed by the city. Of those, 24 are currently eligible to retire and walk away at any time. And that's not including the officers that have military time that could make them eligible for retirement earlier. So with this contract, we're hoping to become more competitive and attract officers from the outside agencies as well. It's very expensive to put a cadet through the academy to be able to, just what we've been doing all these years, training officers and letting them go off to other places, and that agency is getting all the savings of not putting them through the training. We will now be able to bring officers from other agencies to do that back. And HR has already indicated to us that they've had some officers reach out to them that are interested to lateral over to San Angelo. Again, what they've talked about, this pay plan goes away from tenure-based pay, which is where we currently are in our pay plan, to an education-based pay plan. It incorporated our certifications into the salary. And the biggest takeaway is the better trained officers impacts the quality of public safety and the quality of police service, which benefits the community. The better our officers are, the better trained they are, the better service they can provide. Real quick on the hiring process, like Ronna talked about, we'll be able to now have lateral officers. So officers with certain qualifications can be hired outside the normal hiring process. So we even put in some restrictions in that. It's not just a random person that is coming from a really small agency that doesn't know how to be a police officer in a city this size. They have to have at least 4 years of experience. They have to have an intermediate certificate. There's some requirements for them to be eligible to lateral in. Also, the police chief can make them go through the academy if he chooses to, or portions of it if he chooses to. Those lateral officers, a big bonus for them coming in is that they can be paid at their certification level. So if you have a 20-year officer coming from somewhere else, they can come here and get paid at what their certification level is. If they have a master license, they get paid at the master level. We can also hire part-time officers to fill the vacancies in times of need. Something we didn't put in the slideshow, loyalty points were added into this contract, which is something different too. So employees with the city, or well, more specifically the department, like dispatchers, records clerks, CSI techs, if they decide to become an officer, they get loyalty points, 1 for each year of service, up to 5, when they take their civil service test. The promotional testing, this is, in our previous contracts, we had promotional testing changes, and this, we even went even a little bit more. They have to have, to test for sergeant, you have to have an intermediate certificate and be with the department a minimum of 6 years. So you're getting a more qualified candidate for the rank of sergeant. Sergeants are the frontline supervisors that are the first point of contact for a lot of people, and you have to have really good trained people in those positions. Laterals have to have a 4-year requirement with the city and the same certificate to be able to promote. To promote to lieutenant, you have to have a minimum of 4 years as a sergeant and have an advanced license. Again, we're wanting those more senior people, more trained people that are trying to test. And then the assessment center, like Ronna talked about, was added at the request of the city.
We will talk about that, the assessment center.
Okay. Did you have a specific question on it?
No, just explain what it is.
It's just a further level of testing. So you have the written test, which is what everybody has to take first. The officers that pass the written test then go on to the eligibility list and then have to go through the assessment center. You have a board it contracts with outside agencies, correct, to bring in qualified people to assess each individual person. There's sandbox exercises. They can come up with whatever kind of questions that they have to try to test the candidate to see they might be smart on paper, but can they handle the work in person? You know, can they do that when they're put to the test that way? Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. I'm sorry? Okay. I didn't get to go through it. When I promoted to sergeant, it was when the old contract had already expired, so I didn't get that experience, so I can't give personal knowledge on that one.
Well, I guess you could go back and do it, right?
No, I don't think I want to do that.
Question on the assessment.
Yes, Larry, please.
Does that also include a review of records?
I believe it does. Yes, it does. So the assessment center, the city knows more about that. That is their request to put in the contract, which, I mean, it makes sense, but anything else on the assessment center?
Other questions, comments? Tom, anything else to add?
No. I was just having a few.
Harry,
Don't give
did
him
you
the
have
opportunity,
something?
Mayor.
Harry?
When he's finished, I'd like to ask Officer Flores a question.
Okay.
I'm almost done, sir. We changed the probationary period from 12 months to 18 months, and the duration of this contract is January 1st to December 31st. So I believe that's all I have on that.
Harry?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Charles, Blue, whatever you want to go by today. My question is, you're a master police officer today.
Yes, sir.
If you were promoted to sergeant, would that master go with you, or do you need to get certified through each of those particular areas as a sergeant?
The license would translate with me up the scale for pay as far as seniority within the department, and then duties in the department. Those things would change departmentally, but the license will follow me. Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you.
Further questions?
I've got one, Brenda.
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
So guys, if we're looking at this contract right now, when it goes into effect, how many of the existing staff at PD get a raise? Ballpark it. I mean, we don't have to be precise. Is it 20%, 30%, 50?
Right now, I think everyone gets something right now. Some get more than others because we have some highly educated people within the department that are going to get moved up, but everybody gets something with this. And we feel that this was the best way to introduce this type of pay plan, to get it in. And working with the city government, I believe right now we've done as best we can, but everybody's going to get something.
Okay, so my second question, as you look at it for 2024, does it look like you could handle this one in continuity and perpetuity, something similar to this out in 25, 26, 27? Is it something that departments are going to? Because what I hate is we have to come back to this deal every year. I mean, every year we come back with something different. It'd be great if we had one, and I thought we did that back in 17 or 18, had a plan that covered for years and future years going forward. I get it, I just don't know how we go through this one, and this may be a question for Brian. No, I don't mean to.
Yeah, so Brian Kendrick, Director of Human Resources. In my first conversation that I had with Blue and Noel about this, and they brought a College Station, again, they were one of the first ones that were going to this. What we've seen is this is the direction that folks are going, and I think this is the foundation for the future. I think we want to focus on education, certification, folks that can make the right decisions when they're in the field. So I think this is a good foundation for the future.
Well, the three of you have worked hard, obviously, with the city. I know you've spent a lot of time and hours, and the city has, and you all have, and I know that that's hard for you negotiating for everybody because everyone's got an opinion, right? And so I'm sure you took a lot of hits and had a lot of conversation. End of the day, are you confident that the team of people, our police officers today, are happy and satisfied with this proposal?
So every vote that we had was a yes. We did not have 100% participation, but everyone that showed up to the voting was a yes. And so I think we had 144 votes out of 163 eligible.
Pretty
so
good.
it was an overwhelming response. And just to piggyback off what you just said, I appreciate the time that the city manager and his negotiation team have given us. This has been I don't want to say difficult, but it is a transition for all of us to a new type of pay system, and we're trying to get ahead of this retention recruiting issue, and we feel that this was the best way, and it was a team effort on both sides.
That's what we want to hear. Tommy, did you have a question or comment?
Just someone alluded to it in their presentation. I don't know if it was Mr. Bellini or Mr. Flores, about the cost to train from beginning. Just general costs, are we talking 50,000, 60, 80,000?
If we talk about salary, benefits, equipment, time, it's pushing $100,000.
Okay, so
for each one.
We were training people, putting $100,000 into them and saying, see you later, and they're going over fully trained. Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And we also benefit from some transfers too. We'll be able to, based off of that same
We will now,
analysis.
yeah.
So
Yes, ma'am.
this
We'll be able to
opens the
take other
door.
people's all-stars as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it works both ways, and that's a positive too.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
good. All right. Further questions or comments? Now's your opportunity. I'm seeing no more questions or
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
second by Tommy. Any public comment?
I'd like to offer a comment. The comment that I would make is this agreement that we had. Obviously, this was one of the most difficult budget cycles. I've been with the city of San Angelo for 15 years. The appraisal district, getting us the certified numbers was quite a chink in the process. So what I would say is, though I didn't get to give you the normal presentation that I give you related to salaries because of the situation this year, this should get us to all about 85% competitive with cities between 50 and 150,000 in the state of Texas. So this will put like every city employee on the same on a level playing field. But I do want to stress that it is 85%. There's still some work to be done.
With that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item C, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance for Z23-08 to zone property to the single-family residential and zoning district being 31.356 acres located northwest of the intersection of Arden Road and FM 2288. Aaron, you're on.
Good morning again. Aaron Vanoy, Assistant Director of Planning and Development Services. We spoke briefly about this case, or alluded to it last time when we talked about the annexation for this area. This is the true rezoning for the area. And so you see this over in Arden Heights with Arden Road there to the east, or actually to the south, and then FM 2288 to the east. Right at 31 acres, will be in District 6, Larry Miller, and in the Bluffs neighborhood. It is going from coming in as R&E, which is 1 acre lots, and is going to be rezoned to RS1. There will be a combination of half acre lots and RS1 lots, smaller lots. So just over 250 houses planned in this development over time. You can see the plat there on the right, this neighborhood area across from the state park along FM 2288. You see the northern lots are just slightly larger, closer to the half acre size. That is a product that right now seems to be doing well in some areas, as well as, of course, smaller houses in some other areas. This area being new development and needing new infrastructure out there, they will probably start with some of the larger size lots to help pay for that infrastructure. This was approved at Planning Commission unanimously, rezoning this area from Ranch and Estates to the RS1 zoning district. And that is our recommendation today as staff to City Council, and I'll take any questions.
Larry, any comment or question?
Parks.
This is just a zoning issue.
I understand. No, I'm very happy with this.
Further question? Tommy?
Aaron, you didn't mention city water and sewer. Will there be, at some point, city water and sewer extended to this area?
Yes, there will be. Initially with the half acre lots, they may not have sewer right away.
Right.
Water is along FM 2288, and so that extension is going to be a little easier. And so that is their main item that they're coming to the city for, is water, because we actually have a good supply of water. And then as they start developing, they will add the sewer system out in that area to those smaller lots so that they can come onto the sewer system as well.
Do you happen, this is maybe too broad of a question, but if they start with the half acre lots, they can put in septic?
Yes.
Is there a process by which folks are notified when they purchase a half acre lot that when in fact sewer is extended, that they will be required to tie on to that at some point in time? Whether that process is through the developers, if it's through the city, so that there's not this. I've got an area in my district now that folks, that's the way it started. They're still under the impression that they're not going to have to pay for sewer when it gets out there. Yeah. Is there a process by which we notify, or somebody notifies the purchaser of a lot?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I know the full answer, other than in general, yes, there is notification, particularly when that septic system fails. And say, you think about the lake area where we're getting a new trunk main that goes through and some laterals that come off. Those areas through the development process were explained at that time. As those new sewer lines come through and your septics fail, you'll be required to connect to the city sewer system. It could be Patrick could speak more clearly to that, of how that process actually happens through the wastewater department, or maybe Shane might. But I know that we do have a process that we go through as a city.
Again, I understand. it's just not pleasant to deal with those folks whenever, they say, well, I didn't know that. Well, whether they did or not, I'm not sure, but okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
And that's where that division department looks very closely at plats like this and look at where are those utility easements? Are they labeled? Are they clear? And hopefully that gets translated on to the ultimate buyer of that property that, hey, you have a utility easement here in your front yard or backyard or wherever that may be.
Good. Thanks, Aaron.
Well, and also, Tommy, when someone buys and then resells, the person who buys it after the initial thing might not be aware of it as much as the initial people perhaps were. So through time, some of that communication was lost. Once we open up for public comment, I'll let you speak. Further questions from council on this item? Do I have a motion for approval?
Larry?
Second by Karen. Public comment?
Thank you. And he hit on this point I was going to ask too. I lived in Round Rock and was on planning and zoning and development, all this kind of stuff, and went through all this, and we had a lot of areas there, and we have several of them here in San Angelo, and I live out in the country, that have gone through this process, and it is not a clear process when we switch from city service in areas where we have septic tanks. Where we have septic tanks, and it is a problem because the people are not knowledgeable and they're not told this when they move in there, and 5-10 years goes by, because I don't know how many years it'll be before you get sewer out there from the city, but it'll be a long time, and I don't know what the costs of are that, and again, we're all paying for the costs as that goes along, and then the homeowner gets surprised, and usually it's the second or third homeowner by that time. And so this needs to be addressed at this issue from the part of the development on for the homeowners and we, the public, that are then being taxed on these things, and then our taxes increase and all these kind of things. So that is an important thing. And as an engineer that does plumbing, mechanical, and electrical for a living, and I do all this kind of stuff, and I've seen this lacking in a lot of the processes. So again, thinking about the whole development and what happens when it becomes that, and as you're moving toward that, and the costs. So were they developed in for getting all the city sewers and stuff out there, and is that then going to be passed on to the people out there when they don't know it?
So today, the motion is to approve bringing that property into the city center. And so that's what we'll be voting on is that issue. So with that, there's a motion, there's a second.
Madam
Yes,
Mayor, ma'am?
Yes, you may.
Just looking at this plat, Highway 2288 has frequently been completely closed because of accidents. This seems to be a significant number of residential lots needing emergency services, and only a single entrance to and from those residences. Should an accident occur at what can easily be foreseen as a very busy intersection, there's only one way for emergency vehicles to get into the community should there be a second emergency. Has emergency services considered those aspects of this proposal? Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? We'll take a vote. All those in favor of this rezoning as presented, taking in the 31.356 acres, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Motion passes 7-0. Item D, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending Chapter 12, Planning and Development, Exhibit C, Land Development Subdivision Ordinance, Chapters 1, 5, 9, and 10, addressing administrative approval of certain subdivision plats and other revisions and clarifications to ensure consistency with state law and changes to the city's zoning ordinance. Okay, Aaron.
All right. Good morning again. Aaron Vanoy, Assistant Director, Planning and Development Services. So this primarily is to move our subdivision ordinance or our platting ordinance where cities obtain that infrastructure, utilities, right-of-ways, streets, all of those things into mirroring the state law that has been changed over the last couple of sessions to basically do an approval with conditions, or straight out denial. It is not a discretionary item. If a plat meets our standards, then it must be approved at Planning Commission. And that's why y'all have designated that decision-making power down to them, is that it's not discretionary. And so this is what we're looking to do, to make more of those plats to be administratively approvable unless they have a variance request. We have had legislation locally that has assisted with addressing the width of our roads, our right-of-ways, and our infrastructure, and how those get laid out into our neighborhoods. We've worked with our development task force through those and the developers through those, and they have kind of come to a pretty good agreement of what it takes. There are a few cases that still come through with variances that come to the Planning Commission. Those cases will always come to the Planning Commission to be heard, to find out if that appointed board feels those variances are warranted under the subdivision ordinance. So right now, after the last legislative session down in Austin, the state law allows most plats to be approved administratively by staff. The exceptions include a plat for which a variance has been requested. Again, our only variances that we really have here is paving width and right-of-way. There's really not any other variances that are eligible. Utilities under the utility ordinance are not eligible for variances. We can't just waive utilities. We can defer and say, let's hold off till there's further development, but we cannot do a variance and waive them. That would have to be a city council action at that point, which rarely happens. So this ordinance does not address that type of variance does not come into this ordinance, if that makes sense. So staff is recommending that the ordinance be amended to allow all or most other plats be approved administratively. If they meet the ordinance, they meet the design criteria within our subdivision ordinance, let's approve it. Let's move that developer forward so they can start their drainage studies, they can start their street and infrastructure plans and get those things moving.
And then that would mean, Aaron, that the comments previously made about fire, emergency services, and all those things are addressed within the plat that would be approved. In other words, that plat would not be approved unless it has addressed the issues as public comment has brought up.
That is correct, yes. So all those different review groups of the city will look at that plat to meet their ordinances that they have for the design criteria of the plat.
Okay.
The Planning Commission did have a recommendation that the proposed draft provide that the commission review will be required for plats with variance requested. Any residential plat that required a public hearing, and then preliminary plats that are 10 acres or larger. So preliminary plats are where we set out our future, where we look at our master thoroughfare plan and does this property fit in? And they thought 10 acres was a good breaking point of, all right, city staff can probably deal with those smaller tracts of land. Let's let the public look at these larger tracts of land that allows it go to a public hearing so that we can hear more about it if there's some public discussion to be made. So the one thing that we do want to note is that if there's a reason for the applicant in their mind, or even in staff's mind, there's not a variance, there's not something apparent, it still can go to the Planning Commission. This would not prohibit it from going to the Planning Commission.
They could request that.
They can request that, absolutely. So we don't want them to think, well, the city staff has the final say. They have the opportunity to go to Planning Commission, discuss that with the planning commissioners, and make a decision at that meeting. In the amendments, changes to notification requires to match the changes in state law. Previously, there was notice for for all residential plats, replats, there was notices. The state law changed actually about 3 years ago that said you can do that afterwards, after the plat has already come through. And so that's what we're trying to do, is just mirror that we still notice. If there's a variance, we notice before the meeting. If it's automatically approved because the design allows it, we would still notice that area, but it could be after that decision is made. And the reasoning behind that from the state level is, again, subdivision plats are not you can't just make a decision. It is, if it meets the ordinance, it must be approved. They can't just have well, we really don't like the design of it. If it still meets our ordinance, it must be approved. And so that's why the residential notification is really just letting people know that maybe that land has changed owner, maybe there's a new lot, but they don't get to come and influence whether it meets the ordinance or not. It does clarify that the commission and the director can take action even without a formal recommendation by the plat review committee, which means that's kind of the staff committee. We have to take an action under state law within 30 days. That's been on the books for many, many years. We've been meeting that, in fact, and seating that with our planning commission, and so that's just going to mirror the state law again. There's a couple of things in there that we're removing. This really kind of removes that administrative subdivision, just kind of puts them together, that there's no need for that separate distinction. And then it references in our subdivision ordinance a planned industrial park, but we actually don't have that in our zoning ordinance as a zoning district, so that's really just a cleanup item to take that out of the subdivision ordinance. With that, are there any questions?
Questions? Comments? Tom?
So, Aaron, sometimes we've had times planning approves something unanimously, and then we overturn it unanimously. So if it comes in and meets the spec, meets the plat, and planning approves it, is there a way for council to go back? So do we fit in that little 30-day window? We have 30 days to come back and request something be reviewed or something brought to council?
The director position has the ability to appeal a plat to the city council, as does the applicant.
Right.
I don't think it allows the city council per se to, hey, we want to look at that. I would think it'd have to be something fairly controversial, and Teresa, I don't know if you have any direction on that?
But I mean, there's been some times where, in my district, we put in, the Dollar General, some things that brought up some huge controversy before and after, but
yeah.
I would say we're always not perfect, and somebody can bring something up behind the fact and go, well, do y'all realize, planning approved this, and this is going to happen? If we have questions, and should those questions arise to something that's controversial or needs another review, is there powers or means within the process for us to come back and look at it?
I think this is a platting provision, so you're not that in the weeds on these kinds of issues yet. I mean,
Okay.
those come back. But I think in the past, the way that's happened is the concern is raised with the department, and then the director does the appeal to bring it back. So that's always an option. I
So
also
we
want to
wouldn't
point
as
out
a council.
one more thing, just to make sure the document matches the presentation, that it's also any preliminary plat that has 6 lots or more that has to be approved by the planning commission, unless y'all have changed that.
No, that's
Okay.
correct, yeah.
So I know sometimes we
Repeat
have
that
concerns
again.
about whether the document or the presentation is correct. It says a preliminary plat of less than 10 acres and fewer than 6 lots may be approved by the planning director. A preliminary plat of 10 acres or more or with 6 lots or more must be approved by the planning commission. So it's not just the 10-acre ones, but it's also those with more than 6.
6, okay. Yes, further questions or comments? All right, so with that, is there a motion for approval? So moved by Karen.
Second.
Seconded by Lucy. Public comment? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. We will now move into item E, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2023, and ending September 30th, 2024, for 1, Police Department salary adjustments, 2, Fire Department salary adjustments, 3, ongoing projects and capital items, 4, Home Affordable Housing Program. You're on, Tina.
Thank you, Mayor. Tina Deersky, Director of Finance. This budget amendment is what we usually refer to as our carryover budget amendment, where departments that haven't spent funds by year end, that maybe they had already gotten quotes or had projects going, they asked to carry those funds over to get those projects completed in this fiscal year. The first one is related to police and fire public safety pay adjustments. With that budget amendment, there's going to be $1.2 million for each department, and that will be allocated as a stipend for the first quarter of this fiscal year that we're in, and then starting January 1, 2024, that will include adjustments to base salaries. The second one is for facilities maintenance for cameras for the City Hall parking lot. We're needing, I think, additional cameras in the back of City Hall for those parking lots back there for security purposes. Street infrastructure fund, we're requesting to carry over just under $1 million for street repair and maintenance funds. Street and sidewalk accessibility, they had some savings that Public Works had some savings within the street light budget, so we're requesting to carry over $275,000 to set aside for street and sidewalk accessibility funds. General equipment replacement is requesting to carry over some uplifting projects that they had in the works but didn't quite get completed before the end of the year. For the airport, they're requesting to carry over $21,000 for machinery and equipment. Solid Waste Fund is requesting to carry over about $200,000 per professional services related to the permitting at the landfill, and then $80,000 for vehicles. Stormwater Fund has several projects that they're requesting to carry over funds for, including trailer wrap, $5,000, some capital projects, $67,000, vehicles and machinery and equipment of about $156,000, and then professional services of $91,000.
What's the advertising trailer wrap?
I believe that's the trailer that they purchased, but I'm going to have to ask Shane or Patrick to say exactly what that's for.
Good morning. I anticipated this one getting questioned. Per our MS4 permit that the city has for stormwater purposes, we're required to do so much level of public information and public education. And so what we want to do is utilize this $5,000. We have a construction trailer that our stormwater operations department uses when they do stormwater projects around town. So we want to wrap that trailer and let it be a little more pronounced and a little more educational for our citizens that says, hey, this is what your stormwater fee is doing today. It's improving this particular area. It's doing this. We do it all over town, but I'm sure very few people actually know that that's their stormwater fee at work. And so we want to advertise that and promote our services and what our guys are actually accomplishing out there in the field through a little bit of passive promotion.
Okay, I see no other comments. The combination, just a minute, we'll get to you. So this overall presentation is a tremendous dollar amount. So I'm not sure what the total is, but it's millions of dollars. And so the question mark is, are these projects that are ongoing, are they just over budgeted, so there's leftover monies? What are we talking about when we're talking about all of this money that's being carried over, and a timeline for when these carryover projects, if you will, would be spent?
So for most of the items we're presenting today, there are actual specific projects that are related to each dollar amount, and they were either purchased but not yet received, and so they need the funds carried over in order to make the payment when they do receive them, or they may be something that they had already gotten a quote for but hadn't, the vendor or whomever didn't have the product available at that point in time. Mostly that's what these funds are being carried over for. With the enterprise funds, the carryover is really a drawdown of the fund balance, right? So with the enterprise funds, they have that funding available. My staff goes through to make sure any of these requests that we approve at the city manager level before we bring them to you, that money is there and available, and that they're not going to be detrimental to the fund. The only one that I'm aware of that is not a specific project, and it may be a specific project, Patrick will know this, is the money, just under the $1 million in the general fund that we're carrying over for streets maintenance and repair. He may have a specific project, but I'm not sure.
Patrick, yes.
But either way, that's what it would be for, and we're going to carry it into the street infrastructure fund so that it may only be used for street repairs and improvements.
No, and that's correct. So this money is money that we've saved throughout our street and bridge department over the course of the year. This is historical practice for us. It's one of the ways that we got Rio Concho Drive taken care of. We used operational dollars through that. Through 3 years of carryovers, we finally accumulated enough money to take care of a project that, quite frankly, 3 years ago had no funding to take care of. So we asked for your privilege of carrying this over so that we can accumulate a balance to do a street project that's not necessarily already allocated within the bond funds that y'all approved so many years ago.
Questions from council? The other question I have is, and this is really for Human Resources, Brian Kendrick, but, or I guess Veronica, and this isn't challenging it, it's understanding how we manage it, and that is when we do stipends. Because when we give stipends, it's compensation for salary, right? How do we use that stipend money to better understand what the real salary is? Because we hand a check to somebody instead of putting it into their base salary. But then when we try to evaluate base salaries and we say we're only at 85%, where does that stipend come into that calculation?
It doesn't, and so it doesn't go at all to base salary. The stipend in this case is to make up for from October 1 through January. So preferably, yes, you're correct. We want to put it in base salary. But in this case, to make up for that ground, we did a stipend, and it's going to be the same amount for everybody that's on staff for those departments as of January 1.
Civil service.
And I asked the
Civil
question.
service, that's
yeah,
correct.
I asked the question not because of this specifically, but because last year we also gave out big stipends to every employee. And yet when we start talking about how we compare to other cities, we never use the stipend dollar amount as if it ever happened. It's like it just disappears, and there's no consideration to how it impacted base salaries at any level.
Yes,
And
that's
so it's just a
correct.
question, it's a comment, it's not challenging this. It's just, I think we as a council want to better understand the stipend evaluation
And-
relative to base salaries.
And I would say that on the flip side of that coin, when we give stipends, it's usually given with an unsustainable funding source. And so that's why it's also not included in base salaries, because we can't sustain that level of funding.
All right, so I don't know if you were through. Did you have something else to say, Veronica? Okay.
I think I have just a few
Okay.
more on these. For the water fund, some carryovers for vehicles, machinery, and equipment, and then they're carrying over just under $500,000 for the TxDOT Advanced Funding Agreement on Old Cristobal Road. Water reclamation is carrying over $114,000 for vehicles. Health insurance fund is carrying over $15,000 for PCORI, which is Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute fees. It's a mouthful. And then emergency managing is carrying over $16,000 for training. The home fund is carrying over $200,000 for the affordable housing projects, and that is, I believe, funded by the Development Corporation. And that's the last one.
Okay. Questions from council? Teresa?
Yeah, Tina, I want to clarify one thing for the people who might be watching, because I know there's some are for this. The line item that's listed as the general capital projects for $275,000, that is what we refer to as the curb ramp program
I
funding?
broke it.
Is that correct?
That's
Sorry.
the money that we're going to use
That's,
towards.
that's your curb and
Yeah.
cut ramp program, I think you
Yes.
called it? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to be clear, thank you.
I broke his machine, sorry.
Okay, with that, may I have a
I
motion
have a
for
question.
approval?
So moved.
I got a couple of people who went, oh, was there a question? Well, then, go ahead.
The Old Cristobal Road project, I believe they were seeking a grant under the defense budget for that. Did that fail, or what's the status on that?
Shane is going to come up and speak to that.
What we have on council here today is the state's portion of it from Chadburn out to the loop. And so that's our agreement with them, where we're having to move the water lines out from under their proposal, or out from under their roadway as they widen and expand it. What you were talking about is the city's portion from Christoval Road to Avenue L. And we have submitted, actually, grants on 3 occasions at this point, and we have been unsuccessful so far. So, but again, we're going to keep applying, so we're going to keep at it.
Okay, so with that, is there a motion for approval? Moved by Harry, seconded by Lucy. Public comment, please, Jackie.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions just from a financial management perspective. And again, I tend to look at things, I've been a small business for many years, worked in major corporations, and as a home budget, we have lots of money that's being carried over that wasn't spent for the projects it was appropriated for, or if it was left over, then they weren't appropriately budgeted. And if we're carrying over money to save to do other projects, why aren't we just doing those projects as projects and not taking this money and carrying it over and continuing a project that you're going to use for something else? Number two, I don't think the city, nor do I want my tax dollars spent on $5,000 to advertise a truck. I'd rather you spend that $5,000 on the stormwater problems we have in this town, and I think that's an inappropriate use. And so I'm concerned about that. And then also we have very small portion of our city budgets that are allocated for facilities maintenance, engineering, and capital projects to begin with. If you look at the overall budget, and I have concerns about how these are being managed when we have things like this that come forward, because it's a lot of money, and it's my money too. And so that's the way I look at it. And plus, from the engineering and management perspective in corporations, how we manage projects, we need to look at this portion of it. And these are big things, streets and stormwater and access. So I would wonder how can, things like painting a truck, how is that a good use of $5,000 when we could use it other places? And then all this carryover, and why wasn't it appropriately done? And then just if you have it left over, turn it in and start a new project. Don't just say, oh, we got to go do this.
I think the answer to one of those, and we'll have explanation to a much greater extent, but I think what Tina was indicating earlier was that some of the monies that are being carried over are monies that, let's say, they ordered 2 new vehicles, and it was approved and budgeted, but those vehicles have not been delivered yet, and so consequently, it's carried over. So that would be one explanation.
I get that,
And
especially in today's world.
Yeah, and so in many of those cases, and we can go through them individually and talk through those, but that explanation would apply to a lot of those things. A project had gotten started because they couldn't get contractors, it couldn't complete the project, so that project's still ongoing. Consequently, the funds travel with that project. I will let.
Sure.
They sifted off to go do another.
Mayor, that's correct. And there are projects that are started during the year that need to be completed. So we look at the monies necessary to complete those projects, and we ask for those carryovers to get that completed. Also, the wrap on the trailer, Patrick explained that when we collect monies on the stormwater fees, there's a component that requires advertising. We can't spend it on anything else but advertising. That's what that is. So I know that you may not agree with that.
Is that state regulation?
Yes, ma'am, it is. So, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
As part of our permit requirements.
Okay, so are there any other items specifically that one would want to ask a question about why this carryover exists and what is the project attached to this carryover item? Jackie?
Yes, ma'am. So the street and sidewalk accessibility is specifically now allocated for ADA compliance and getting that around. That is correct?
Jackie, that's correct.
Yes, ma'am.
That was specifically pulled from some of the unused funds to accumulate this money to use specifically for the ADA issue.
Because that's one area where we're extremely behind. Thank you.
So that's only can be used for that. Questions, comments, further comments from the public? All right, so I think I have a motion. I have a second. We've had public comment. We'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving item E, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Mayor.
We do not have a closed session today, so we will do the item 8, which is follow up on administrative issues, no executive session. Announcements and consideration of future agenda items. Consider one of those is considering scheduling one meeting in January on Tuesday, January the 16th.
Yes, ma'am. We've had discussion among a few members concerning the ordinance that covers cars and vehicles parked in yards.
Yes, sir.
We'd like to propose that study and have a ordinance presented that corrects the situation.
Okay, so what we'll ask is that whether that's the next council meeting or the first one or the only one in January, that we include a presentation on the ordinance relative to vehicles being parked on yards, lawns, et cetera. And so the public can be reminded, because that ordinance was passed 8 or 9 years ago, so the public's not familiar, I think, with the decisions that were made attached to that ordinance, and then we can discuss whether changes need to be made. Is that what you're asking for?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
So
Anything?
that's a presentation and direction, basically, what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Just to be clarified what those rules are, because some of it goes down to width of street. And so we just need to relook at that and decide if it's still an appropriate ordinance relative to people's concerns, right? All right, any other items?
So just one meeting in January, is that,
If y'all are amenable to that, that's what staff is recommending.
works for me?
Well, for us, it's really based off of what the city needs to present to us for consideration. So if having one meeting in January resolves and allows for all the presentations that need to be made by city staff, then I think we're good.
Yeah, historically, the agendas in January have been very short, some meetings lasting as little as 30 minutes. And so we think it would be better use for everyone's time to, due to the holiday, things like that, to condense it down to one meeting.
Okay. With that, do we need to make a motion on that? Or we just say, okay?
Agreed.
All right, with that, then may I have a motion for adjournment?
Move we adjourn.
Okay, motion. Second. Yes, Jackie? Yes.
On the ordinance for the cars, and we also have ordinances for commercial properties for keeping things cleaned up with growth around electrical systems and fire hazards and things like that, and that needs to be addressed because we are not addressing, we have several issues in this town. I've gone to the fire department of commercial facilities like Stadium Park Plaza, that is the back end of it is a fire hazard, it's a mess. The parking areas in front of Westlake and that whole area there have been made a mess because of all the additional traffic, and it's not only a fire hazard, it's an ADA compliance hazard, and it is a pure safety hazard. And who addresses those, and how do we, let people know, we have an ordinance that says you must keep the trees out of your electrical, you must do all this stuff in commercial facilities. So how do we address that?
Well, what we're going to do is start with the issue with vehicles on property, and then get more specific about which ordinances apply to that. And then
Yes, ma'am.
perhaps in the February 1st meeting in February, we can bring up those ordinances as well and re-review those.
Thank you, because we have a lot of places around town that have been allowed to just, and it's a fire hazard now and a safety hazard, just like cars around, stuff
We'll
like that.
continue to look at the ordinances
Okay.
and look for presentations to better address issues.
Thank you.
Some of that may already be addressed, and there's city ordinances that you may want to contact code compliance.
There are ordinances, they're not being, y'all are not making them comply, and the commercial facilities and all are not being made to comply, and a lot of our local, it's just a compliance, nobody's enforcing compliance, and I've gone to fire department, and I've gone to the fire marshal, and I've gone to permitting, and everybody just goes, whoopee. So if it was great to have an ordinance, but if nobody follows it, to your point, then what's the point?
Thank you, Jackie. I guess we have voted on adjourning, because you all are standing up ready to go, so I guess we're adjourned.